So what do you see on your screen?
EPA Brownfields cleanup grant.
Okay, it's taking up the whole screen, pretty much?
Yep. Yep. We're in the right-hand corner.
Okay.
Whoa.
There's Tracy.
Oh, there's Tracy. Look, here's Frank. He didn't register though.
Oh, no. And we are recording, so. Tracy, can I get a sound check from you?
Testing, testing.
There you go, good. Well, we had 8 people register. It'll be interesting to see if they all join us.
I know, I hope they do.
Tell Frank this is how he gets Facebook friends.
What?
Tell Frank this is how he gets Facebook friends. By participating in online meetings.
I said, I wonder if I put those lights on.
Oh, it says there's 4 participants. Jay Reed has joined us. Hello, Jay. We're going to wait a little while longer to see if some of the other people who registered have showed up or will be showing up. So please bear with us, Jay. Also, if you would like to ask questions, you can raise your hand and I can activate your microphone and you can ask questions. There's also a chat function or a Q&A function, excuse me. So you can ask questions on the Q&A function also. It's just turned 6 o'clock. We have John from the mayor's office joining us. So we're gonna wait until like 3 minutes after the hour before we kick off. Milt is joining us. So again, we're gonna wait for 3 minutes, till 3 minutes after the hour, just in case people are having trouble logging in. For those of you who are joining us as attendees, there is a function on your screen that allows you to raise your hand if you have a question. And also, and then once you do raise your hand, we can activate your microphone and let you speak. And we'll probably do that at the end of the presentation so that everybody can talk. Also, there is a Q&A function where you can ask questions and have them answered. If for those of you who are shy and don't like being recorded, you can do that through the Q&A function. I myself am a little bit of a wallflower and don't like the attention, so I tend to write questions. Although the nice thing about speaking is there's no spell check. Doesn't matter. It is now 6:03, and we have 4 guests as attendees and 3 panelists. Your panelists are myself, Rob May. I'm Director of Planning and Economic Development. Also joining us is Pam Gurley, who is Administrative Assistant for our department. And we are joined by Tracy Costa, Costa from Ransom. And she is our licensed site professional. She's been working with the city under a US EPA grant for Brownfield assessment. And we are looking at several sites in downtown Brockton. What we're trying to do is gather as much information as we can about these sites so that we can eliminate as much uncertainty or provide as much information to the development community as we can to help them speed up the redevelopment process. Oh, I have one person in chat. I thought this property was sold. Yeah, I did too. So Jay Reed asked, he says, I thought this property was sold. Is it privately owned? No, it is not privately owned. It is still owned by the city. The deal that was struck during the Carpenter administration limped along all the way through the Rodriguez and into the Sullivan administration, but the bidding party that we had been working with did not or was unable to close the deal, primarily because of the environmental concern. They didn't know what was on the site. So at this point, I am going to hand it over to Tracy Costa, again, our licensed site professional, and we're going to go through a brief presentation, and then we'll open it up for discussion at the end of that. Tracy, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Rob. So again, I'm Tracy Costa. I'm an LSP at Ransom Consulting. And as Rob conveyed, we've been performing environmental site assessments, mainly phase 1 ESAs and phase 2 ESAs. And the Corcoran building is...
In English, that means what?
Environmental site assessments.
Thank you.
So the phase 1 environmental site assessments really require an actual site reconnaissance, a background review of history, and at the end of that process, you determine if there are any recognized environmental conditions. And if there are recognized environmental conditions, there are recommendations to perform phase 2 activities, which could include above ground and subsurface investigations. So we will review what has been done, performed to date to really support a Brownfields cleanup grant application. So the city is intending to apply for an EPA Brownfields cleanup grant application this year. The applications are due on October 28th. the city can apply for up to $500,000. And it's our understanding the city is going to apply for $250,000 for the cleanup of this site. If you could advance, that would be great. So here's a little history of the Corcoran property. So it is referred to by the assessor as parcel 135-074, a little, about three-quarters of an acre.
Oops, sorry.
No problem. Again, it's a former warehouse and office building constructed in 1915. It's about a little over 30,000 square feet. And really the Corcoran Plumbing Supply Company occupied the property for about 50 years. And prior to that, there was mixed usage, residential, commercial, and it was a lumberyard since the 1800s. And the city acquired the property in December 1996. It's my understanding it was a bankruptcy. Next slide, please. So here's a bird's eye view of the site. As you can see, it's surrounded by both commercial and I believe some residential use. And there's also a park to the northwest of the site. And you'll also see in the middle, that's an MBTA commuter rail station. So it's a really prime location for the city and a great opportunity for mixed use. So, and also the building itself is pretty cool too. So next slide, please. So again, in terms of the environmental activities that have been performed to date, TRC on behalf of the city over a number of years performed a number of phase 1 environmental site assessments. As I conveyed earlier, the results of those phase 1 ESAs are to determine if there are any recognized environmental conditions that arise. And the results of those phase 1s were the presence of underground storage tanks or suspect underground storage tanks, an above ground storage tank that's constructed in a concrete bunker. It's really concrete block bunker filled with sand. And there was also a suspect buried object, and we could talk a little bit about that too. So subsequent to performing those phase 1 environmental site assessments, TRC performed a phase 2 environmental site assessment in 2011, and that was comprised of soil and groundwater investigations. So that was drilling, test pit investigations, and the collection of soil and groundwater samples that were submitted for laboratory analysis. There were levels of petroleum hydrocarbons in soil and groundwater, but those were all below the Mass DEP reporting threshold, so that it's not a Mass DEP site. In addition, TRC performed a hazardous building material survey. So that is really comprised of the collection of suspect building materials to determine if there's the presence of asbestos, lead, PCBs, so lead-based paint. So the results of that did determine that there's asbestos containing materials, including roofing materials, and that's important to remember, along with lead-based paint. Next slide, please. So we performed an additional geophysical survey under the assessment grant this year because there were some data gaps. Again, this suspect buried object was a bit of a mystery, and we really wanted to get our arms around it so we could understand what needed to be remediated at the site. So as you look at these photographs, you'll see that the lines that we're showing there are the areas where we saw suspect underground storage tanks or product lines. That second photograph depicts an area which we refer to as a courtyard outside. That's a small 300 to 500 gallon underground storage tank. All the way, that fourth picture to the right, that is a furnace in the basement of the building, the southern portion of the building. I think it was pretty much a mystery furnace. It was important for us to find it because we were able to then trace back the lines to find where this mystery underground storage tank was. Next slide, please. So here's another bird's eye view. And as you see, we have defined these areas of concern. So that area I referred to, the courtyard, we're calling AOC1. So that small tank, so you see a van and you see that A1, that is a small underground storage tank, 300 to 500 gallons, we assume contained fuel oil. AOC2, to the right of that, we found 2 suspect underground storage tanks. What was interesting about these tanks was they don't appear to be metal. So there's still a bit of a mystery. We don't know if were they perhaps encased in concrete. We don't think they're fiberglass reinforced plastic, but they seem to match up with some of the historic permits that were pulled for the site. Now, if you go all the way to the right, you'll see that boiler room that was depicted in the prior photograph. We were able to trace the product line from that room over to an area we refer to as an inaccessible room. So we'll show you what we're talking about regarding that inaccessible room. Next slide, please. So here's the inaccessible room. So if you we're standing in a former garage area, and as you peer into the room in that middle picture, to the right, you actually see the details of that room. So when performing a geophysical survey, really the equipment needs to contact the floor. And obviously, as you can see, there's too much debris for us to have done that. If you look to the left, you'll also see that there are problems with the roof, that it's caved in. So there are structural concerns. And because we know that there was asbestos identified in roofing materials, the material that in that room could contain asbestos. So for those reasons, and now we understand why TRC wasn't able to determine it. We're assuming there's an underground storage tank, probably maximum capacity 1,000 gallons fuel oil that fed that boiler in the basement. Next slide, please. So based upon all of the information collected to date, we think that we have enough data to really get our arms around a cleanup approach. So what that would include would be removal of the above ground storage tank. It's about 275 gallon tank. Again, it's encased in concrete, filled in sand, and underground storage tank removal. So it would be that small 300 to 500 gallon UST that we saw in the courtyard, the 2 suspect underground storage tanks that we assume are about 1,000 gallons apiece, and then the other underground storage tank that we assume is in that inaccessible room. So as you remove tanks, you've got to assume that those tanks may contain liquid or fuel oil. So we refer to that as containerized waste. So part of the excavation is first you remove the tanks and you transfer that containerized waste to drums or to vacuum trucks, and also the material that you clean from those tanks. And also you excavate any of the soils that are contaminated. So conservatively, we've estimated up to 250 cubic yards. Although the depth to groundwater is in excess of 13 feet below ground surface, we also wanted to include a contingency for dewatering. So that means lowering the water table to be able to access any contaminated soils. So that's also included. Now, in terms of that inaccessible room, it will require that a structural engineering evaluation be performed to make sure it's safe to actually go into that area and remove the debris and to perform the excavation. Because as you can imagine, during excavation activities, there will be some vibration. So that will be one of the steps as part of the cleanup. And also removal of the debris and abatement of the hazardous materials. It may be possible that all of that material needs to be assumed as bulk waste. And lastly, subsequent to performing the excavation, backfilling with clean fill, and performing groundwater monitoring. So currently there's no, again, as I conveyed earlier, there are no Mass DP reporting obligations, but they could come up during tank removal and encountering contaminated soils or groundwater. So that's really the big picture. I think that may be the last slide.
Oh, that was the last slide.
That was the last slide.
So I'm going to go to this slide just as a background. And what I am going to do is elevate, well, not elevate, but I'm turning on, excuse me, people's microphones in case they want to speak. And Joe, I want to let you know you're using an older version of Zoom, and I can't turn on your microphone, but if you have a question, please raise your hand, and we'll take it from there. John, it looks like you're active. Your microphone is now active. You have a hand up.
Yes,
So
can you hear me,
please start
Rob?
with your question, sir. Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, I just want to say hello to everyone. Thank you all for joining. The mayor sends his regards. He's on a conflicting scheduled agenda item, so I'm joining you, and he does send his regards. Thank you so much for the presentation. Rob, I'm here representing the mayor's office. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. So as Tracy has outlined, we have discovered at least 4 tanks, if I heard her correctly, and possibly a 5th tank, Inaccessible Room. We need to.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
That is the 4th tank?
The fourth tank is the above ground storage tank is not depicted here. A2 was,
okay.
yeah, that was just an underground anomaly, and it seems to be just a manhole cover. So, but not associated with any underground storage tank.
Okay. So we have 3 definite and possibly 4 storage tanks that we need to remove. We need to do some structural analysis of the building so that we can get into that inaccessible room. We also have to do a cleanup there. It looks like we're going to be removing the tanks, the material that might still be in the tank, all the fill and vent lines that are under the property and going to the tanks, and any contaminated soil that is around the tanks. Is that a fair summary, Tracy?
Absolutely. And again, the other caveat is if we need to perform dewatering, not only does that lower the water table, but it would also remove any contaminated groundwater if that is encountered.
Okay. So we are applying for a US EPA grant that will allow us to clean this up. One of the reasons why previous prospective owners have not been able to close on this deal is that these tanks are there, and because of the inaccessible room, they may have been concerned about the amount of financial liability that they would be taking on as new property owners. And so the city is going to be stepping in to do the remediation work, which then will make it a lot easier for us to sell this property in the future. We're also going to be working with Mass Development and with Mass DEP. DEP offers an environmental liability insurance program that will help prospective buyers to make sure that they're not, well, the last thing you want to do a piece of property and then find a tank under it. It can get very expensive in cleaning that up. So does anybody else have any questions? Got a Q&A just popped up. Hang on just a second, please. Anonymous attendee would like to know, what is the ballpark sales figure for the property after the cleanup work is done? That's a good question. Under Massachusetts general law, when the city disposes of a piece of property, it has to sell it for at least the assessed value, the appraised value of the property. I think the property is appraising somewhere in the mid 300s right now. There are opportunities where the city could sell it for less, but that would require us to go to the Department of Revenue, well, it's A&F, but to make a claim that we need to sell it at a lesser price, because the people who are buying it or what the work is going to be going on there is needed, and we're adding to the deal. So it's like leaving some money on the table. But I think the city has been trying to secure funding because of the COVID crisis. We have all lost, the city has lost revenue streams, and it's got to be a really strong proposal, some major charitable purpose for the city then to leave money on the table. So I'm going back and saying it's somewhere in the mid 300s, I would think, 300,000, 350, somewhere in that area. Thank you. Answered live. Any other questions, folks? Oops, just opened up again. Marlon, yes. The city will use a federal grant. The maximum amount of grant that the US EPA will allow us to apply for is $500,000. We think that this work is going to be about $300,000. So there's a 20% match. So the city of Brockton is going to apply for a federal grant from US EPA of about $250,000. The other $50,000, we are trying to secure an additional grant from mass development, and we'll be able to match the US EPA grant with that grant. As a backup, we also have the option of using DIF dollars, District Improvement Financing. And when we sell the property, we would of course like to recoup any amount of money that the city actually puts into this. But if we have grants to pay for it from the federal government or for the state, then we don't have to lose any cash. So I think it's a win-win for us. And do I have another question open? No. And guys, you can also turn on your microphones and speak at this point if you would like to. Or if not, are there plans to offer tax incentives for the property? Is the next question. Thank you. The property is potentially available for the Housing Development Incentive Program, HDIP. That is a state tax credit for the development of market rate properties. There's also a Brownfield redevelopment tax credit that an applicant can apply for from the state. And there are some city tax incentives available through a tax exemption. So, in the first year, you don't pay the full amount of taxes in the first year until you can recoup your funds. And we've been doing that in downtown on a lot of redevelopment projects that are associated with the Housing Development Incentive Program. So it really leverages the state tax credits to make redevelopment of this property go forward. If there were an industrial or commercial user, there's also tax increment financing that the city would be interested in working with. We don't have a final vision of what this property should be used for. So, you know, some people have proposed residential redevelopment, other people have proposed commercial redevelopment. It could be a lot of different things. So when we do put it out for disposition, we will ask in the request for qualifications and the request for proposal, we'll ask the prospective purchaser what kinds of credits they think they'll need to make their deal work. And we'll also ask them what their financial pro forma is, because we want to make sure that they've got enough, you know, skin in the game to make it work without offering up all the city's money to make the deal work. But we're willing to put some into the process just to make that happen. And I have Joe. I'm going to promote you to panelist in that maybe. Joe, you should be able to speak now if you want to unmute your microphone. Or you can use the question and answer section and type something.
Yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon,
my
Joe.
question is, isn't there like a whole lot of money the city is losing from tax revenue? And I understand the $300,000 value you have, but if that was developed the way that I had seen in the local enterprise, that they would gonna put the restaurant with outdoor seating on one side and commercial restaurant and then residences in the back.
Yes.
Is there not a consensus that it would bring in more than that kind of money after a couple of years?
Yes, the redevelopment of the property certainly would bring in more money as it's redeveloped. Right now, it's paying zero in property tax because the city owns it. So transferring it to a developer, we would establish a baseline tax amount, and going forward, you know, as the value of the property rises, so does the amount of taxes that people will pay. And the city will negotiate with a developer who needs assistance to make a project work and bring more tax revenue. Certainly a all commercial project may, I don't want to say certainly, let me take that back. A all commercial project may generate more tax revenue, but a mixed use property could also bring in more value because of the value of the residential development and the mixed use commercial. And then restaurants, of course, bring in restaurant tax.
Right, but it also brings in people to downtown. And
yes, it does.
I was dead against seeing what they did with the Enterprise block and when they rebuilt that building that the facade had fallen off. But if they can bring more people into downtown in a commercially viable way, like the guy that's doing next to the Elm Court that also did the piano place.
Yeah.
So if he had, so I mean, if I said to you, Bob, you were getting out of work at 3 o'clock, let's go grab, you know, something to eat and we could talk about this. You couldn't find me a place downtown that we could walk to, that you could have a decent place. I mean, you're very limited. I mean, unless you're going to go to Joe Angelo's, and, you know, it would be nice to have.
We do need more restaurants downtown.
And places for people to go. I mean, you claimed that the courthouse was going to save downtown, and they couldn't even keep open a Subway. So I think that if we have people going downtown and get away the vagrants and get something like this, which is something that we're looking for 300,000, um, we've been sitting on. I think that somebody should be sitting down, getting somebody lined up to buy to be able to do a rooftop restaurant. I mean, I don't know if you go over to where Howie's office is and see his overlook of the city. It's a beautiful location there.
Oh, yes, it is. It is. And we are certainly been marketing downtown Brockton and the city in general. And we have several development projects that will be announced in the very near future. But there is a lot going on in downtown Brockton, and each day it gets a little bit better. Certainly having more restaurants and more places for people to go are going to be very important. Joe, I want to take a second to recognize Councilor Jeffrey Thompson has joined our conversation.
Thank you very much.
And before I let him speak, I want to acknowledge that Marlon Green also has his hand up. And so if you want to unmute your microphone, please go ahead, Marlon, and ask your question.
Thank you, Bob. I think but most of my questions were actually answered in your previous comments.
Rambling?
No, thank you. But I do have a couple additional questions. Number one, you mentioned earlier that there were interested parties in the property, but because of the amount of work that needed to be done, the city wasn't able to go through with the deal. Can you say a little bit about kind of what the business nature of those interested parties were?
All three of those have been mixed use projects where they would use the front portion of the building as commercial space and then the 3 floors of the supply building. I don't know if you can see my cursor moving on the screen.
I can.
So this back half of the building is 3 stories. So this area was being looked at as commercial development, whether that be restaurants, lounges, small retail space to serve the neighborhood. This area, the courtyard, would be, greened up quite nicely and would allow for, residential development in the back of these 3 floors. One of them even proposed adding another floor to the building. I don't know how viable that was, but it would be an interesting concept. And we would love to be able to attract those developers back to the table once we get this property clean.
Okay, great. Thank you. Could you just say a little bit about, and I'm just not aware of it, so if you can kind of enlighten me on, are there any specific kind of
634.
I'm sorry, Marlon, keep speaking.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
You got cut off by somebody.
Sure, that's fine. Is there any specific outreach plan to the minority community and women-owned business for these potential opportunities for development?
Yeah, that is a very good question. And yes, there have been, and there continue to be. We have a very strong relationship with a group out of Boston called Builders of Color. And we've done a couple of different tours for them and brought development teams out of, and they're not just in Boston, but they're in, in and around the other places. So we're trying to get them more active in our community. We're also working with local development teams that are from the either Haitian or Cape Verdean communities. I know we have a couple of projects going on downtown where one of the developers or the principal developer is, I believe, Cape Verdean. So we continue to make efforts to both local and regional minorities and women development professionals involved.
Great. Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it.
Councilor Thompson, would you like to say a few words? It looks like we are wrapping up shortly. I can smell my dinner almost done, so.
Oh, there you go. So,
There you
yeah,
are, sir.
thank you. And thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. I apologize for being late here. I see that this meeting is being recorded, so I will go back to listen to the beginning of it, because I was interested in the underground storage tanks and, you know, what type of contamination is on this lot, and what are we looking to clean it, to bring it up to a level both for commercial and residential uses. So, you know, obviously we want to develop this very important property in Brockton. It's, I don't know how large it is altogether, but I know it takes up, it's a large building with a large parking lot. So this is a area that's close to our downtown, walking distance to our transportation modes. So it would be great to get this long abandoned building back up to a commercial and residential standard. That could be another jewel in downtown Brockton. So again, I'm looking forward to replaying this to hear what was said. And thank you, Rob, for putting this together, and for everybody joining us tonight. Thank you.
You're welcome. And we're going to let Marlon have the last question. He's popped in here. He says, what is the timeline for the funding application and the work to be completed? We hope to have the funding, well, the funding application is due at the end of this month, I believe the 24th or 25th.
28.
Close enough. We're at the government. But we will have it in ahead of time or on time at the very least. We expect to hear from US EPA probably in late winter. So probably in end of end of January, sometime in February, and it would probably be the beginning of the next, it's not the next fiscal year, I'm sorry. So it would be probably in June or so when we would be under contract to do the work. Fingers crossed that we all survive the next 2 months and get to the start of the new calendar year. And we should also hear from Mass Development probably before that time about the matching funds. So we're very excited about this opportunity. It has a lot of potential and has a lot of strength in our application. So with that, I thank you all for joining us. We are taking email questions or comments. If you have them, you can submit them to planning@cobma.us. That's our planning department. You can also find us on the web at Brockton. Oh, Pam, help me out. I'm sorry. BrocktonMA.com or .us, excuse me. So the email address is planning@cobma.us. So thank you very much for all participating. Have a great night.
Thank you.
And we are out.